Welcome to Midgame Fundamentals, Episode 2. In this video, I'll be talking about minion waves, why it's important to play around them, and how to do it. There's many benefits to having the waves pushed out before you make some kind of play. You put the enemy team in a position where they have to make a difficult decision. Do they go to the minion wave in one lane, or catch it in another lane? Because minions provide vision, it's much easier to make safe plays because you'll know if the enemy crosses through. They'll also show obviously when they go to catch the wave. Minions being pushed is going to make any good plays that you make better and any bad plays you make not as bad. In the case where you push out minions and then win a fight relatively cleanly, it's going to be much more beneficial than if the waves are under your turret when you take this fight, because you're going to be able to go from that fight to the enemy turret and immediately start applying pressure. But if the wave's under your turret, there's not a whole lot you can do because you have to wait for your minions to get to their side of the map. And by that point, the enemy team is almost respawning, so there's no real pressure. On the flip side, let's say your team gets aced. It was a really bad fight, you thought it was good, but things happen. Well, if you have minion waves pushed out, the enemy team can't immediately start taking all of your turrets. But if you got complacent and you didn't push out the minion waves when you were supposed to, it's going to be really punishing. If you're not careful, this is how enemy teams can end immediately after winning one fight because you didn't have the protection that you needed. Generally, the minimum goal is to have 2 out of 3 lanes pushed. There are some situations where 3 out of 3 is more appropriate, but I'm not going to be going into that in this video because that's a little bit more complex and team-based than I'm trying to get into. The benefits of having at least 2 lanes pushed is that it provides more pressure than the opposing team can provide, since that only leaves 1 lane that they have pushed out. Rotations aren't nearly as risky because you're going to see the enemy champions as they go to deal with the waves, so you know you're not going to be caught, and your teammates can rotate as well because they've pushed out the other lane. If you need to reset, it's not nearly as big of a deal because you have the time to do so. The minion waves are under the turret, you don't have to worry about the enemy team taking your turret. But if there's any doubt, make sure to check out the last video in this series where I was talking about recall timings. So which lane do you push? This is going to depend on your role and champion. Obviously, for some roles, you're not really going to be pushing at all, but I'll get into that later in this video, so stick around for that. If you're playing a champion that does want to be pushing a lane, you're either going to be near the objective or on the opposite side of the map. So for example, if Dragon is up, the opposite side would be top lane. If the new objective Atacon spawned top side, then bottom would be the opposite side of the map. Same thing for Baron. Champions that generally want to be on the opposite side of the map are split pushers, so anything that's really good at clearing waves and hitting turrets, such as a Trendemir, Yorick, that kind of thing, or very mobile champions. This can be in the form of an ultimate like Rise ultimate, Pantheon ultimate, or it could be something like a Quinn. She may not have the fastest way of clearing the game, but she can still cross the map very quickly with her ultimate. Of course, similar logic applies for teleport. If you don't have those factors, you probably want to be closer to whatever fight you're expecting to happen. This could be a side lane, but it could also be mid lane depending on what's appropriate for the game. However, there can be a case where you have some of those factors to where normally you would want to go on the opposite side of the map, but your teammate can simply do it better. That's fine too. If you have 2 split pushers, then of course you don't want to both be in the opposite side of the map because you're splitting XP and it's not very effective. So that's something you should take into account, but it's a pretty rare case. When to push out the minions. Think about when you want to be leaving the lane. Is it in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, as soon as you can? Depending on how you answer that question, you need to adjust how fast you kill the minions. If you're looking to play around a major objective fight, usually you're going to be looking about half a minute to 45 seconds is when you're wanting to leave the lane. Obviously there can be exceptions to this, like I said before, if you have teleports or really high mobility, but generally that's the goal that you're looking for, because you need time not only to get to the fight, but also to place wards, clear wards, set up picks, whatever you need to do. If you push the wave too early, the enemy team has time to respond. They're not having to choose between 2 different options. If you push too late, then you're not going to have the option to rotate, which can be okay if your intention is to continue to hit the turret, but that's something you need to keep in mind. Generally, it's better to have both options available to you until you decide at the very end which one you want to go with. Another thing you have to consider is how to push safely, because even if your timing is right, you may still end up getting caught if you're not syncing up your push with your teammates. If your teammates are pushing the tier 1 mid turret, it's not a good idea to push the tier 3 bottom turret. You're extended way further than your teammates, and so the enemy team is going to rotate straight to you and kill you. There's no reason not to. You're really easy for them to kill, unlike your teammates, which are much closer to your territory. So ideally, you want to be pushing roughly the same distance on the map so that the enemy team has a harder time dealing with both of you. It also makes it easier to get the appropriate vision that you need because you're working with a similar area, unlike at the tier 3 bottom or top turret where you need much deeper wards. If you realize that you don't actually want to leave the lane for a full minute, minute and a half, whatever it may be, sometimes it's appropriate to freeze the lane temporarily and or slow push so that you can set up that timing that you're looking for. The extra benefit of this is whenever you're slow pushing, you don't have to go as far into the lane to kill the minions, which means it's generally not as risky. Of course, the downside is that it does take longer, but if your intention is to stay in the lane for a while, that's not a problem. Here the Victor is pushing out bot lane because the dragon's going to be spawning in about 40 seconds. His teammates are pushing out mid lane, and they're not too worried about top lane because it's already pushed past neutral, and their ADC is dead, so they don't have everybody that can be pushing right now. Notice how the Cho'Gath and the Lee Sin move over towards the bottom side of the map, because they want to make sure that the Victor is able to push out safely, and they can easily get the dragon with no issues. It also allows for them to set up wards and get picks in the future. Because the Ashe is top lane, Viego can't walk up like this. He's going to be too outnumbered. And this is the great thing about having two lanes pushed out. Even if the Ashe continues to push, she can't really threaten that much compared to how much Victor's team can threaten, because they're getting soul and they're able to threaten either the tier 3s. In this clip, Riven is pushing bottom and Garen is pushing out top lane. So there is pressure in two different lanes. They also draw the TP from Hui in the river. Riven can use this as an opportunity to threat the tier 2 turret. If they go to deal with her, then they're losing the minions top side, and they're not going to be at the mid lane fight. Ezreal starts to walk down, and Kled uses his TP. This is great. Riven got what she wanted. As long as she lives here and then rotates to mid lane, they're in a really good position. Unfortunately, this 1v2 didn't turn out quite as well as she would like, so that feels pretty bad. But the idea is definitely still there. And as you can notice, even though she lost the fight, it's not that consequential because the lanes are pushed out. The enemy team can't go and take her turret immediately. Another thing to consider is whether you want to push the wave to neutral or fully crash the wave. Of course, you can also do in between, but no need to make it too confusing. Pushing it to halfway in the lane, or as I refer to it, neutral, is much safer and it's faster because you're not having to spend the time or go as far into enemy territory to get the full wave crash. But there are some downsides to it. The enemy team isn't as concerned about minions dying or their turret taking a ton of damage. This also significantly shortens how much time you have to make a play before needing to return to the lane to catch the minions. Unlike a crash where it's so far into the enemy territory, it's going to take them a while to get it back to your turret. As I said before, not everyone is going to be pushing out the lanes. For one, it's because there's only 3 lanes to push, but also with a support item and jungle item, it's not always going to be the most beneficial option. So what should you be doing instead? Hovering near the waves. The most important part of this is you remain in fog of war. Do not show on the map, because that gives the enemy team the information they need to make proper decisions. But if they don't know where you are, they have to respect the threat of you potentially being there much more. The ideal timing to be hovering on a wave is as they connect, because this is when both your team and the enemy team are going to be looking to kill the minions and then back away. This is the riskiest time. If you do this well, you're almost completely nullifying the risk of your ally dying while pushing out the lane. But that doesn't mean you're doing nothing while in the fog of war. You can also go place wards, kill a jungle camp, look for a pick, whatever you want to do. Just stay close enough to where you can help your teammate out. Once they've pushed out the wave, great. Then you can go rotate somewhere else with your teammate or continue to place wards, whatever you're looking to do. The important thing is that your teammate didn't die while pushing out that wave, and you looked for the potential pick when you know the enemy team also wants to collect that wave. In this example, the Elise wants to get the enemy Raptors. He knows that 2 of the enemies are nearby in the mid lane, and his teammates want to push. The great thing about this is not only is he able to get the Raptors if he wants to, but he can also look for a pick like this, because the enemy team needs to walk up in order to push out the wave. If the enemy jungler was nearby, then this would be a lot harder to do, because then it becomes a 3v3 instead of a 3v2. But even if it doesn't turn into a kill, at least you know your teammates aren't going to get caught out nearly as easily. There are some exception cases where you're going to ignore the minion wave and not bother pushing it. Sometimes it's simply too late. You don't have the time to go push out the wave or two because a fight is about to happen. You need to get there as soon as possible. Whether it was your mistake or someone else's that caused it, doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you're still trying to adapt and do the best that you can with the hand that you've been dealt. Maybe it's not too late though. You expect to be leaving lane in roughly a minute to a minute and a half, but you're not strong enough to actually push out the lane without getting killed. The enemy team may be too mobile, you have no items, whatever it may be. In that case, you have no choice but to adapt. A third reason could be you want to give up the objective anyway. Your teammates are dead or all of you are behind as a whole, so you know you're not going to win the fight anyway. May as well freeze the wave, chill out, clear some camps, whatever, and wait for a better opportunity later. The main takeaways from this video should be that you're trying to apply as much pressure as you can without anybody dying. You do this by not overextending yourself, making sure you're timing waves at the correct time, and when you're done with that, you go over and make sure your teammate can push out without dying. Proper timing is crucial. The timing of when waves are being pushed is very important to make sure that it applies pressure at the right time. Too early or too late does not give the same value. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in episode 3 where I'll be covering vision control.